Welcome everyone to our second webinar in 2021. My name is Jay. I work in the International Student Recruitment team. I will be your host today. So this year we will have a new set of webinars that are different from those in 2020. So our academics will tell you an inspirational research story and how the story relates to what we teach, as well as the opportunities and benefits for students who study with us. So at the end of the session, you will have a better understanding of the subject area and why the University of Tasmania is the right place for you. So today's session is about social work, a popular subject for international students. I'm very excited to have Dr. Jocelyn Boucher Uyua from our College of Arts, Law and Education here with us today. Jocelyn is the co-head of discipline social work. She will discuss how social work enhances and empowers people and the role you could play in impacting your community. Thank you, Jocelyn, for joining us.
Thank you.
Before we start, we have a few housekeeping rules to go over. I'll be facilitating today's session. Jocelyn will talk for about 45 minutes, and then we will have a 15 minutes Q&A. Please feel free to use the Q&A function or the chat box if you have any questions. After the presentation, we will look at the questions and answer them. We'll try to cover as many questions as possible, but if we can't, we will definitely get back to you offline to answer them. So enough talking from me. Now I will hand over to Jocelyn.
Thanks so much, Jay. Thank you everyone for being here. Thank you for the invitation to share with you the work that we do with students in social work. I come to you from Lutruwita, Tasmania, from Nipaluna, Hobart, the land of the Palawa people. I pay my respects to them, to their elders past, present and evolving. As I said, my name is Jocelyn, as Jay has introduced me, and what I'm about to share with you is a little bit of what we do with students in their third year studies in the Bachelor of Social Work, their first year of studies in the Masters. They are enrolled in a core unit called Social Innovation and Sustainability and 21st Century Social Work. And this unit is quite unique in the country. There are no other social work programs that have a dedicated space for exploring how social workers contribute to things like climate change, for example, how we as a profession can play a key vital role in addressing a grand challenge like climate change. So what I'm about to show you is material that we use in class with students. And we began the journey of talking about social work and how we connect to grand challenges like climate change with quite a grim reality that is captured in this video to then open our conversation on what it means to be facing the times that we face and what it means for our social workers stepping into that social, cultural, political, environmental context. So Jay, will you play the video for us? We'll watch it. It goes for about 6 minutes and then I'll take you back, bring you back and talk to you about it as I would with students. Thanks, Jay.
Sure, I'll just end the slides for the moment. I'll go straight to YouTube so you can watch the video properly and also listen to the sound. Jocelyn, please let me know if you can't hear the
Yep, I
sound.
can see it.
On an article in the New
I
York
can hear
Times.
it. Thank you.
The average temperature on the surface of the planet has already increased 1.7 degrees Fahrenheit since 1880, which may not seem like much, but think about it this way. The heat from human emissions is roughly equal to 400,000 Hiroshima atomic bombs exploding across the planet every single day. Future generations are in big trouble, but for now, it'll gradually continue to get warmer and storms will grow more intense, with longer periods of drought in between. But longer term, if emissions continue to rise unchecked, the climate disasters will be so severe they will destabilize entire nations, send millions of refugees across borders, cause widespread extinction of most species on Earth, and melt the polar ice caps, leaving most of the world's coastal cities several feet underwater. All this could take centuries, but something like the sudden collapse of agriculture would trigger immediate chaos in society. Best case is we get our act together and begin to rapidly bring emission levels down. Meanwhile, Earth turns out to be less sensitive to greenhouse gases than we currently believe, plants and animals adapt quickly, and major technological breakthroughs help society limit emissions and adjust to climate change. But these are all the opposite of what we're actually seeing, so the only thing in our control is to limit emissions using all available tools and best behaviors currently at our disposal. Worst case, the collapse of food production causes spiraling prices, and as our capitalist utopia breaks down, billions starve as our world gets violent and messy real quick, kind of like a zombie apocalypse, but with extreme hunger spreading chaos instead, so yeah, still just like a zombie apocalypse. This would be coupled with the melting of the Antarctic ice sheet, leading to rapidly rising seas that would force us to abandon many of our greatest cities and all of the social and scientific progress that we were making within them. Adding insult to injury is the fact that many of the emissions were emitted while building these now abandoned underwater metropolises. If emissions continue unchecked, we're looking at a total rise of between 80 to 160 feet, which would occur if all the ice in the poles melted. So the oceans will rise. The real question is how fast. Scientists only have Earth's history to base their predictions on, which suggests that the rate has occasionally hit 1 foot per decade, so we'll have to adapt to an altered coastline sooner or later, but probably much sooner than later, because computer forecasts only give us a range of future possibilities. The most important evidence comes from the study of past climate conditions, which clearly show that every time the amount of carbon dioxide in the air rises, the Earth warms up, ice melts, and the ocean rises. What's important to remember here is that we are in uncharted territory. Humans are pumping carbon dioxide into the air far faster than nature ever has before us. Scientists have been publishing strong evidence that warming is making drought and heat waves more frequent, causing heavier rainstorms and more severe coastal flooding. But while the internet has made us all more aware of weather disasters in distant countries, it's hard to prove these are all directly made worse by climate change. Canada and Russia both have vast frozen lands and could see some economic benefits from a warmer climate. Putin and the Russians, and until recently Canada as well, have been reluctant to make ambitious climate commitments, but expect that to change as these countries realize they will be swamped by millions of refugees from less fortunate nations. Libertarians and other political conservatives do not like the policies proposed to fight climate change, and have chosen to try and block them by actively undermining the science. This effort has been funded by the oil and coal industry, who favor making money above all else. As more resources are devoted to solving the problem, our chances at big technological breakthroughs are improving, but we still should be spending about 3 times as much money as we currently are on these efforts, according to several in-depth reports. You can reduce your carbon footprint by doing things like plugging leaks in your home insulation, installing a smart thermostat, taking public transit, taking less airplane trips, buying an electric car, and putting solar panels on your roof. A big one is eating less meat. But what's really needed is for you to speak up and exercise your rights as a citizen, because strong, collective action through state and national policies is how we'll make the most impact. Considering that we've been ignoring scientists' warnings since the 80s to limit emissions, we're pretty late in the game. But we've finally reached a moment where nearly every country in the world agrees this is a huge problem and seem ready to commit to taking at least some kind of action. Leading corporations will continue to make bold promises to do their part, low-emission technologies will improve, and many states and cities will go much further than any goals set by their national governments. The United States, the world's biggest economy, is finally starting to move aggressively, and China, the world's largest emitter, is beginning to recognize that it needs to do the same, as many of its megacities will be underwater if the seas rise too high. But it's up to us, the ordinary citizens, to continue demanding our political leaders tackle climate change, the hardest problem that humanity has ever faced. So like and share this video to help it spread. A special thanks to Justin Gillis of the New York Times for putting together the original article, which is linked in the more info section below. Until next time, thanks for watching Immediate Chaos in Society.
Thanks very much. Thank you. Could we have the PowerPoint up? Thank you, Jay. Thank you. So that's a pretty grim reality that we just watched there. And it's a kind of grim reality that also shocks our students as they realize that we are in a predicament and we do have a role to play as social workers. Can we go to the next slide, please, Jay?
This is a simple
It's probably the video. Thank you. So we pose this question to our students. So what can we offer as social workers? And it's often through these conversations that a lot of really innovative ideas come through. But we take them back. We take them back to understanding what is social work? Who are we as social workers? And we take them to these definitions that are prescribed by the International Federation of Social Work and the local Australian Association of Social Work, where they define social work as a practice-based profession and an academic discipline that promotes social change and development, social cohesion, and the empowerment and liberation of people. Principles of social justice, human rights, collective responsibility, and respect for diversity are central to social work. The local branch ASW say the social work profession facilitates social change and development, also social cohesion and the empowerment and liberation of people. And they go far to say that principles of social justice, human rights, collective responsibility, and respect for diversity are central to social work. So they mirror one another in the way both the international representative community and the local representative community mirror each other in how they see social work and the role they see for our profession in the world. Thank you, Jai. So I then show the students a video that brings in a little bit of humor and a little bit of groundness to understand what we do and what we're about in social work. Can we play that, please?
Sure.
Thanks so much, Jay. I can see it and I can hear it. Thank you.
It's smarter to travel in groups.
Thanks, Jay. So we use a little bit of humor there to basically give the message to students and scaffold their learning around what we do as social workers, what our role is in the world, to show them that social work is about bringing people together. That as social workers, the role we play is in connecting people and in showing people the benefit of approaching challenges together as a collective. And don't forget, this is very much coming from a Western perspective where we live in very individualized contexts. And many of the challenges that social workers face in the West are around the power of individualism and how much people have lost connection to one another. And I guess in the face of what we've been through in the last year, it's probably a pretty important message to continue to give students that our role is to bring people together, to connect them so that we can work together. Can we go to the next slide, please, Jay? Thank you. So we are in the business of helping people to work together. Can we go to the next one? And when we talk to them about what that means for a social worker, we talk about how social workers, because of the values and the principles that we work to, because of what our profession is focused on, social justice, human rights, we see how interconnected and interdependent humans and nature are. And because we see the world that way, we value the lived experience of both humans and non-humans. And we see how privilege tends to separate us from not just each other, but from nature. So we see that our current way of life is unsustainable, and it is in fact collapsing in many ways. So we talk about how social workers see this complexity, they see the complex nature of life and on this planet, and how we recognize that we need everyone and everything involved in the solutions for the grand challenges that we face. We talk about an intersectional approach to our work that helps us to think about the world through the concept of systems, helping us to make sense of more complex interactions and informing wiser initiatives that we learn so that we can impact the world that we live in. Thanks very much, Jay. So we talk about, okay, you've just watched a really powerful and grim video about the realities we're facing. So what is the worst case? What are we in for if things like climate change go unchecked and we don't respond? We are looking at a collapse of food production. We are looking at extreme violence across contexts, forced migration as people move to places away from places where things aren't working. We talk about how everyone will need to learn to deeply adapt, and I think the last year has been helpful in showing us just how much we need to adapt. We talk about how we are in uncharted territory. We are facing uncertainty in levels before never experienced, probably. We talk about how people often react to uncertainty with a reluctance to make change, how that produces a spread of anxiety, people become hostile and rebel against rules. We talk about how technological breakthroughs might be possible, but perhaps will come too late. We talk about disease and the impact of climate change in that regard. We talk about the inevitable social disruptions and the collapse that we will experience if the grand challenges humanity faces go unaddressed. We talk about how we are late in the game in terms of responding to these grand challenges and how it is up to us as ordinary citizens to organize and respond. Thank you, Jay. So then we offer them some clues about what we can do, what we can offer as social workers facing these predicaments. We talk about how social workers are trained to speak up against injustices so we can confront things when they're not just, that we are trained to work with people, that we know how to collaborate, we know how to bring people together, that we help people to connect and learn from each other and to help themselves. We talk about how we are in the business of being brave. We help people overcome trauma, illnesses, loss, disability, injustices. We talk about how we are also in the business of innovating, that we help people to find solutions. We help people to think of new ways forward, to dare to live differently, free of injustice and inequality. Thank you, Jay. When we talk about what social work can offer, what the profession is about, and when we canvass these grand challenges like climate change, we offer them some tools. So this is like a very condensed version of the work that we do with students over 13 weeks, which is mainly around this framework of thinking and doing. We talk about how we see an opportunity when a time of great change, of great disruption faces us, we can respond and we can see these times as opportunities to innovate. And we talk to students about how the work of Wall, Daniel Wall, and his textbook is what we use in our classes. And he talks about how in the present, there are always three qualities about the future. In the present, we see the business as usual. We see the moments of disruptive innovation, and we also see glimpses of the future that we want to pursue. Thank you, Jay. when we talk about the business as usual, and we take our time with this, we do exercises, we do mock interventions, we work in small groups, we work individually, we work online, we do all sorts of things to get our head across what the business as usual looks like. We describe the business as usual as the current dominant way of life, the status quo. And we talk about the current way of life as degenerative. It has already been proven to be unsustainable, and we are seeing parts of it unravel. We talk about how this degenerative way of life that we're currently in will over time decline, will change, and it will end. Thanks, Jay. So then we say, okay, what's the second sign that's present today that will help us move forward? These are the moments of disruptive innovations. We talk about how moments of innovations are taking place all the time, and they take many forms. They can be movements, they can be projects, they can be ideas. They take many forms. And they often are about new ways of life that disrupt the way that we've been living thus far. These ideas, the ventures, the movements, all these events that help us and take us forward in sustainable ways. These are moments of disruptive innovation. So we talk to students about wanting to capture them, wanting to be really attentive to them so that we can help those moments grow. We can identify them and support them so they can help us bring the future forward. Thank you, Jay. Now, what is the future we want? We want to design a way of life that's focused on doing the most good. That's what social workers are about. That's what we need in the world to move past inequality and injustice. Innovation, we look for innovation that seeks to cause no more damage and can also heal the damage that's already been done. So good ideas, we see them as springboards to bigger ideas that do no harm. We work with people in place to help them nurture and unleash their potential so that everybody can see a role for themselves in the future that we're creating. We help people shift from a material culture addicted to fossil fuels to an immaterial culture where the values of collaboration are prominent and where we rely on renewable sources of energy. We talk about how human beings know and they value collaboration. So this isn't a new thing that we can help humans reclaim. We talk about the human story from millennia about collaborative abundance. We've always thrived most when we've collaborated with one another and with nature. Thanks, Jen. So I leave them about halfway through the 13-week course with this way of putting it all together that we then sort of unpack and go step by step together in class and through the assessment tasks. And this was my way of blending the work of Daniel Wall and Bendel, Jamie Bendel, who is a leadership academic in the UK. I talked to them about how social workers can help us bring about macro change. We need macro solutions. And we humans are not just the source of the problem at the moment, and in particular when it comes to thinking about climate change, but we are also the source of the solution because we are able to facilitate collaboration. We can build resilience. We can enable relinquishment of those ways of knowing, being, and doing that are no longer sustainable. We can work towards restoring balance within ourselves, with each other, and with nature. We talk to them about investing in reconciliation, and many of our First Nations are very equipped to show us how we do reconciliation after having lost everything. We aim for regeneration, so not just stopping the harm that's being done by unsustainable ways of life, but also healing some of the damage that has been done. We take our time with these concepts. Thank you, Jay. And I draw it up so they've got a visual of what this might look like in practice. I talk to them about, think of our approach as social workers, what we offer the world as social workers, as a tree, where our roots are in our ability to collaborate and our ability to help human beings collaborate with one another and with nature. where the trunk of this tree are about reconciliation and relinquishment. So bringing together the things that don't work, finding a common ground, and relinquishing those things that no longer work. The leaves and the growth of this tree are about restoration and regeneration. So addressing the damage that has been done and making sure we can repair it. And everything I say to them is fueled by the radical hope that we as social workers hold for humanity and the world. We are a hopeful profession because we are in the business of people. We are in the business of seeing humanity thrive. And when I show them this drawing, I call it the C and 5 R's framework. So that's some of the stuff we take the students through in their third year of the bachelor, in their first year of the master's degree. It's a lot to digest for you as an audience in the last 20 minutes or so, but I wanted to give you a real impression of what students go through, the kinds of topics we cover, the kind of ideas and approaches that we teach them. And the uniqueness of our program, because there isn't a program around Australia that focuses on sustainability or social innovation. We are the first ones. Thank you so much, Jay.
That's very impressive. Thank you, Jocelyn, for your presentation.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm happy to take questions, comments, and we can use the rest of the time for that, I guess, because I haven't taken up the 45 minutes, have I?
That's a really great presentation. I haven't related social work to climate change before. It's such an important and a meaningful career, as it can make a big impact on our community and society. And I hope the students who are considering studying social work and becoming a social worker one day have been inspired and motivated. So now it's time for some questions. If you have any questions, please feel free to use the Q&A function or the chat box, and I will go through them. So I'll just have a look. Yeah, so I can see there's a question about the social work job opportunity and outcome. So maybe we'll just narrow it down a bit to talk about the current job opportunities in Tasmania. Like, so what type of jobs are available at the moment? And yeah.
It's a really good question. And when this topic of climate change and how do social workers respond to that are covered, that's typically what students want to know about. So how am I going to be working in this sphere? You know, why do I need to know about climate change and how to respond? How is that relevant to what I'm going to be doing as a social worker? As you may well know, Australia has experienced a period of great upheaval environmentally. We've had extreme weather events. Fire has been a huge issue, and many communities have been directly impacted by fire, and social workers have been at the forefront of the social response to the damage the fires have caused. And the fires are directly linked to climate change. So being involved in disaster responses, disaster work, is what is very prominent at the moment. Social workers who are responding to jobs in building resilience, so say in councils that are creating positions as community development workers, resilience workers. The government agencies are all creating jobs for people like social workers who can help people adjust to big disasters like fires. That's very prominent at the moment, but you can expect job opportunities to go across all sorts of fields, the government and the non-government sector, the community sector. We are being employed in policy, in community responses, in hospitals, in nursing homes, as many people in nursing homes are experiencing great isolation. Given COVID, there's an increasing need for people in nursing homes to stay connected to their families and for their families to stay connected with them. Social workers are helping to develop programs that connect people. We are in schools, we are in universities helping students. We are in community centres working directly with people on the ground to deliver all sorts of supports around mental health, housing, inequality, all sorts of stuff. I mean, I could go on forever describing the jobs that are coming up. They don't normally get listed as social work roles, but their names are very varied. But when you look at the selection criteria and the skill set, these are all social work skill sets and criteria that they're looking for. So the outcomes are very good, very positive indeed. Our graduates, most of our graduates, I'd say about 80% of our graduates are in full-time employment by the time they finish their last placement. So they move into their first year after graduation and they are almost all employed.
So nice. So it's not just about working with younger people or older people. It's very diverse. Yeah, and
It's very diverse.
yeah. And is there any special specializations that are in demand, either in Tasmania or Australia? So
Disaster response has become a real specialization, but we don't offer that in any social work program in the country. It becomes a specialization in the work experience that you have, but equipping our students with this kind of knowledge of how to respond sustainably and innovatively are the kinds of learning experiences that equip people to then go and be in jobs where they are required to design disaster response approaches.
okay, so there's another question about placement. So does the university help students find internships or they need to find themselves? And also, are those placements only done in Tasmania?
Yep. So placements, there are 1,000 hours of placement for both the Bachelor of Social Work and the Masters of Social Work qualifying degrees. And we split those placements into two. They do 500 hours in the third year of the Bachelor, first year of the Masters, and 500 hours in the second year of the Masters, last year of the Bachelor. And we find those placements for students. We organise them, we coordinate them, and we send the students there.
Great. So what do they usually do in the placements? Like what type of activities that they need to do?
They can be involved. For example, last year they worked directly with the volunteers that were assisting people on the ground as a result of the fires. So everybody that directly responded to the fires that occurred early last year were volunteers, and our students were actually doing the checking phone calls and helping them debrief. So that's some of the experiences they had last year. They will be doing shadowing work. They will be doing one-on-one work. They will be running groups. They will be running consultations, community gatherings. They will be working in research with policy bodies, with government agencies. They will be involved in working to design policies that respond to certain things. So the placements are across all the different arrays of social life and government life, really. And yes, they are done in Tasmania, and the placements are done in Tasmania. We have had people do their placement in other places of Australia, but that's not something we encourage. We do our placements in Tasmania.
And also there's another question about the pay. So is social work paid well in Australia?
I don't have the exact figures, but I think the last sort of data that I came across was from middle of last year, and at a graduate level, first year graduate level, entry level in the government sector is probably around 55, 60,000 a year, a little less for the community sector, but because we are professionals and accredited professionals, the pay is quite good.
So what about the career development in the social work industry? For example, how is it different for someone who has a degree or Bachelor of Social Work degree versus someone who has, say, a diploma of community service? Is there any difference for their career development?
Well, obviously the degree is a 4-year degree, or if it's done by a master's, it's a 3-year degree plus a 2-year postgraduate qualification. So when they hit the road, when they are graduate, they are beginning practitioners, but at that sort of tertiary level. So they would be equipped to manage teams. They would be equipped to work independently, and they have the theoretical and practice experience that sometimes diploma students don't get. They study for a lot shorter, and the studies can be quite focused on particular areas of work like youth work. Our graduates receive a very general education.
Great. So what makes a good social worker? Like what personal attributes that they should have? And how does the university support and help them to develop those qualities that are needed to become a good social worker?
Social workers need to like people. They need to like working with people. They need to be very acutely aware of the challenges that humanity faces, that people face on an everyday basis, and have care, empathy. They need to have a bit of an outlook on the world that is social justice focused, human rights focused, environmentally focused. These are some of the values that all of our students hold in coming to social work, and we help them to develop those values and those principles with the array of learning experiences that they're exposed to. I just took you through a very condensed showcase of what we cover in 13 weeks, and then they do the same across all the other units, and then in their placement when they're working with people directly. So, you know, a social worker is a good listener. A social worker is a caring person, someone who's concerned about people and social justice, someone who wants to bring positive change to the world.
That's great. So feel free to ask more questions in the chat box. So I can see there are a lot of questions asking about entry requirements of Bachelor and Master of Social Work. So we might just ask Jocelyn to briefly explain it at the end of the Q&A today, as we actually want to add more depth and value to our webinars this year. So we would like to provide more learning opportunities for our listeners. Okay, so there's another question about the locations of the placements. So are they far from the university? Is it easy to do placement using public transport?
Yeah, absolutely. Students do, in the majority, need to have a driver's license to get from A to B, and often many agencies do call outs, outreach work, so they require students to be able to get in a car and travel to see clients. We can accommodate people who don't have driver's license. We can work with agencies around that issue, so that's not a requirement, but it's preferred. So yeah, public transport is absolutely encouraged. When we talk to students about their preferences for placement, we ask them about their access to public transport, their access to transport altogether, and we try and work with the limitations of their context to place them near their home and in places where they can get to easily by public transport.
There's also another question. What makes our social work course a qualified degree? How does it differ to the other social work degrees from universities, other universities in Australia?
The Masters of Social Work qualifying is an entry-level qualification to social work. So students who are eligible to enter have a previous degree, but not in social work. So what they need is a degree to be able to be social workers. That's what they get through the Masters of Social Work qualifying. So when they graduate, they are at the same level as a graduate with a bachelor degree. It means they are beginning social work practitioners. That's how it differs. It's not a postgraduate per se, it is a qualifying qualification.
Thanks. One of our agents asked this big question. They said they have joined a bit later, so they didn't catch up. But the question is how climate change relates to social work, please. So basically, can you give a very brief summary?
Yeah, I'll try and do that. So climate change is having a big impact on human beings and the planet itself. Humans and non-humans are affected by the impact that we've had as human beings on how the climate changes through time. It's leading to massive emergencies and crises like hurricanes and great big fires in Australia. The polar areas are melting, which means that sea levels are rising. Many species are being affected. Our food chain is being affected. We can no longer live the way we're living and expect the planet to be okay. We are starting to experience the impacts of our activities on the planet. So that means that human beings and nature too are responding in all sorts of ways. From all the climate disasters, we've got so many people directly affected, experiencing anxiety, great loss, great traumas at times. And social workers can respond to that. We can help people face what's happening. We can connect them to other people so we can work together to address the issues that need to be addressed, to help people change their behaviors, to help people understand what's happening, to connect them to services, to help people grieve when they've lost a home or they've lost family because fires or other disasters. Yeah, I think that's a big summary. The recording will be available, so if you want to watch it again, go for it, or the resources will be attached.
Thank you.
I hope that made sense too.
So do we have any more questions about placements, career prospects, or employment?
There's a
Okay,
question here
yeah.
about research, right?
Yeah.
So the question says, how can I be invited to do research intensive stream in the second year? So in the second year of the master's and the last year of the bachelor, students can opt for the research stream, and it is by invitation only. So we target those students who have performed at the highest level. We look for students with a GPA of about 5.5 and upwards, and we approach them to do the research stream. Then the student can choose whether they're interested in the research stream or not. If they are interested, they will be doing a research project in their last placement, and they will be writing up a research thesis that they submit for assessment. That qualification for the bachelor students is a pathway to postgraduate work if they're interested.
Thank you, Jocelyn. So we do have questions asking about the English requirements to get into bachelor's and master's degree. And if they already got social work background, English background in social work for at least 4 to 5 years, are they eligible to Master of Social Work?
Really good question. Because we are an accredited degree, that means we have to follow the rules of the Australian Association of Social Work. And the rules are that graduates have to have an IELTS test result of 7 with an average across each band of no less than 6.5. If they don't have those prerequisites, they can't enter the courses and they won't ultimately be able to register as a social worker in Australia. So that's why also it's important to have the IELTS results. And yes, if the student has studied social work previously and has studied in English, it's a very useful pathway, but unfortunately we still require the IELTS test results because of the accreditation requirements that we have to uphold. And the ASW has some quite set rules around that. So we do it not just so that the student meets the entry requirements, but also upon graduating from the degree can seek registration with a national body.
So what kind of academic background do they need to have if they want to study Bachelor or Master of Social Work?
They can come into the bachelor degree having completed high school directly from year 1. And if they have studied other things, they can apply for advanced standing through their application. If they're coming into the masters, they need to have a completed bachelor degree or equivalent qualification. And we look for people who have at least 8 units of study in the studies of society and the studies of the individual. And that can vary. So that's why we conduct those assessments one by one. And it's worth applying and seeing what advanced standing we can offer. But we look for graduates in the masters who have social science background, psychology background.
Thanks, Jocelyn. Do we have any more questions? If no one has any other questions, we might end today's webinar soon. So if you would like to watch the webinar again, you can find the recordings on our UTAS YouTube channel. We also have a dedicated 2021 webinar page for all our webinars this year. So our next one is about Bachelor of Medicine and Bachelor of Surgery. It's in 2 weeks' time. So you are welcome to register and we will send you more information about that. So if you have any other questions after the webinar or we haven't answered all your questions today, please feel free to contact us and you can find our contact information on the screen. You can call us or email us. So let's have a final look, see if there are any more questions. I think we probably answered the majority of the questions, and there are still some questions about entry requirements. Please contact us and we'll tell you more about the details. So thank you again today, Jocelyn, for your generous time. It's a great presentation.
Thank you so much. Thank you very much for having me. I hope it's been enjoyable, informative. And yes, please send your questions through if we haven't covered your query.
Thank you again. Thank you everyone for attending the webinar today. We look forward to seeing you again next time.
Thanks so much.